I think it's so healthy when the practice that you do kind of feeds your energy. A practice that depletes your energy, it's almost impossible to do that for the rest of your life. But you know that you're in the right path when you practice every single day. It's tough. It's not easy work. But after what you do, you feel like you're meant to be doing that, and you get the energy that makes you continue doing whatever you're doing. Maybe it's your work, maybe it's your life. I think that's the key to having a sustainable practice, is to have a practice that gives you a certain amount of energy surplus.
Hey guys, before we get to this week's episode, I wanted to let you know about an exciting development at Evolve Move Play. So we are bringing back our 2-day traveling workshops. So that means one of our workshops might be coming out to a city near you, or potentially you could reach out to us and bring us to a city near you. We did this for years. When I started Evolve Move Play, I taught traveling workshops all over the world from 2013 to 2019. But after the birth of my youngest daughter, I needed to stay home more with my wife and my 3 kids. And so we stopped those. But now we have a really amazing staff of teachers who've come up with me through the retreats of the last few years. And I myself have a little bit more freedom to travel. So we've got 4 upcoming dates here in the States and 2 dates in Europe coming up where you can come and train with us for just 2 days. That means it's going to be a lot easier entry point as far as cost and logistics for you to come and join us. So check out what's going on with our 2-day workshops in the link down below. And we look forward to seeing you in a city near you soon.
We're here today with Masa Suzuki. Masa, it's really nice to meet you. I've been following your work for a long time.
Thank you.
I know you've been doing parkour for a very long time. You've also got into the movement culture world, and you work as a trainer these days, right? And that's your primary work?
Yes, I'm more of a performance coach. So basically what I do is get athletes and look at their movement patterns and try to help them perform better in different kind of contexts. Maybe it's martial arts, maybe it's field sports, or even like actors and actresses or dancers.
Excellent.
That's what I do.
And tell me a little bit about your parkour background. I was listening to something that said you're part of the first generation of Japanese athletes coming out of the original Jump London documentary. When did that documentary get released in Japan?
It was released in 2004.
Okay.
So there was this TV show called Sekai Marumie. It's like one of those like variety TV shows where like there's a lot of comedy, a lot of like things from foreign countries, and they were like, oh, check out this cool, crazy ninja sport called Parkour, right? And they showed a segment of Jump London. It wasn't the whole thing, but it was a segment of it, like maybe like 30 minutes, and I watched it as a kid and I was like, wow. So
how old were you at that time?
Wow, 2004, right?
Yeah.
So maybe like 12, 11.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like the day after, I went to the park near my house, try to imitate, whatever I can, But, I had no idea what I was doing, but it was fun.
I remember the early days. I started, I guess, a year later than you. I started in 2005.
Okay.
I saw one of David Bell's early videos.
Was it the Spider-Man one?
It was the one with Cyril Raffaelli.
Right. Oh my gosh. That brings back memory with like the crazy backflip, right? From like the super tall building. Yeah. And like Cyril Raffaelli was doing like a front flip from a gas station and everything.
Well, that was Cyril's video, but
okay.
Yeah, he does. I mean, he did that super crazy backflip.
Yeah. Wow. I remember, man, like that was like one of the first videos I was watched as well, like Cyril, David Bell, the Yamakasi 3-run. You remember 3-run?
She saw me. I should.
Yeah.
That'd be fun. I just saw a new video from him about his bamboo setup in his backyard.
Oh, right. That's right.
Then to build something like that.
Yeah. I remember that. He actually came to Japan for the Red Bull Art of Motion.
Okay, cool.
Good. Yeah, and I was the MC there, so I got to talk to him there. But Yeah, wow. That's cool, man. So what can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So what made you go into parkour?
Yeah, I mean, I had been doing martial arts since I was 6 years old, and then I started gymnastics kind of after the '96 Olympics, and got really excited about that, and was trying to gymnastics. I'm a big guy. I'm 6'1",
Whoa.
200 plus pounds, so 220 right now. So it didn't come real natural to me. Like, I have an older brother who's only 5'7" and 140 pounds back then, and he was doing double backflips on trampolines like 6 weeks into training, and
Oh my gosh.
I couldn't do a standing backflip. I started at 15 and didn't do a standing backflip until I was 21. So
Oh.
it didn't come easy to me, but I liked it, and I was good working with kids, so I got hired as a coach.
Mm.
And yeah, I discovered parkour, and it was like everything I loved about gymnastics, but just one layer deeper and more primal and more available to go do outside. And I loved it.
Right.
So that was my story.
Right, and like less rules, right? In gymnastics.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome, man.
So you've been doing like what's really interesting to me about talking to you is a few things. One, the fact that performance coaching coming out of parkour, that's a relatively unique thing. Like, I talk to a lot of performance coaches coming out of the like ecological dynamics,
right,
and things like that on the podcast. I'm familiar, and I've done a little bit of work with Yusuf and Linda from Fight. A lot of their ideas are very kind of overlapping with what we do at Evolve. But so it's cool to see someone who's come out of the parkour community who's working with those ideas and how they interact with it. And then the fact that you work with MMA athletes, because I also have a strong MMA background.
right.
Interesting common areas of interest. So I want to get into those.
Okay, sure.
Deeply into them. You started parkour 2004.
Four-ish, yeah, four-ish. Yep.
You were 11 or 12 years old.
Yes.
And you're probably just training on your own for a while. Did you start to find people pretty early, or was it?
Nope.
No. Okay.
So my first year or two, I just trained by myself. And back in the days, there wasn't any YouTube. 2004, I think 2005 was the year that YouTube was released. So the first year or two, I think the first year, I was looking at those like old BBS channels and like looking at those like video links and downloading videos and
Megaupload.com.
Yeah, megaupload.com. Oh my gosh. And like even MySpace. So what I used to do is that that like little triangle button that has like click play and don't click play? Like even now, like you it's a play button, right?
Okay.
So I keep clicking the play button and like making it slow motions, like.
Oh yeah. Right. Just pause it so you can watch how people.
Yeah. So what I did is like I got my dad's old video camera and kind of compared myself from those really cool, parkour athletes that was already like in the game and myself, and keep watching back and forth, chucking myself in the body, like in the air. That was my first year. So I learned a front flip and a back flip and a side flip on my own, but really messed up form. In front of those like sand pits that kids play with, right? So I learned all those stuff in a sand pit, almost hitting my head, and stuff. And then my father was like, okay, this is too dangerous to watch. So he made me join the local gymnastics club to learn basic tumbling. And then after a while, I found a Japanese BBS because back in the days, I was looking more of the urban free flow and a lot of like the foreign BBSs, right? But around like 2004, 2005, like a couple months after, I found a Japanese BBS, and I was sorry?
What does BBS stand for?
It's like how can you say? Can I search in English?
Yeah. Because I mean, I remember we had all these like you had to download the files. You couldn't stream them back then.
Right.
So
Right. It's an internet bulletin board.
okay, yeah, I wouldn't
Yes.
say message board in English.
All right.
But
Yeah.
it was on the Bourbon Free Flow message boards and
Yep.
forums. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
parkour.net.
Yeah. Parkour.net. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That brings back memories. Like now nobody uses those, but because,
I don't think it exists anymore.
no, it's crazy because, but that's how Japanese parkour started was through the internet bulletin board.
Yeah.
There's this thing called the Nichannel, the second channel, which is like those like otaku animation guys, right? It's like where like those like gamers, otaku guys go and like kind of exchange information.
Mm-hmm.
So the first Japanese bulletin board was in the second channel, Ninjitsu, and it's about like, hey, let's check out this cool new thing called parkour and exchange their informations.
Mm-hmm.
So what ended up happening was like, okay, we are all watching parkour. Let's all get together and move together. So the first time everybody met was like we didn't really use our real name.
Mm-hmm.
We used each other's like handle names,
Yeah, we had that too.
Yeah, okay. So it's like stuck with their handle names, right?
I mean, there was a little bit of that. Most people went by their names where we were, but with some of the younger crowd and stuff, you saw that the handles sticking as we went into real life, which is definitely a unique part of internet culture meets
Real culture.
and those early days of the internet. But yeah, so you started to find people through the internet culture, also mostly young guys.
Yeah, well, a little bit older than me, like maybe in their 20s.
Okay.
Yeah, but that was the beginning of this group called PKTK, which stands for like Parkour Tokyo.
Yeah.
So yeah, it started off like maybe like 10 people, and then like a couple years later, it was like maybe 50 to 60 people gathering up like twice a month to just train. Yeah, so that's how it got started. But before that, it was just all me, man, my own trying to check myself.
I was remembering the other day that like before I ever heard of parkour, when I was about 12, I started trying to teach myself front flips and back flips on a wood chip pile in my back.
Oh my gosh.
I could do them on a trampoline, but I was trying to learn them on a wood chip pile. And I was thinking back about it. And I was thinking about like, if I'd had other kids who were out there with me, I would have like scaled it up, but like doing it on my own was too scary.
Oh my gosh. Like, what's crazy? Like, can we talk about breaking the jump?
Sure. Yeah. What do you want to say about breaking the jump?
Well, it's really crazy about like the mental factor, even with like the fighting context as well, or any kind of sport. Having somebody around you to actually have your back versus going out somewhere, going out there and facing your fear alone is totally different.
Yeah.
Like it's when you're alone, it's like, okay, like it's all me, it's all by myself, right? And you can do it, but you're really in the edge and you can't really have that extra push, right? Whereas when there is your brothers and sisters that you really trust or somebody who really supports you, right? It's it makes the process a lot more easier psychologically. It's crazy because have you heard of like the zone of regulations? Like there's like the green zone, yellow zone, red zone. Yeah. So I feel like when you're training with other people or training within a community, it's easier to be within the green zone a lot more than if you're completely alone.
Yeah. Humans are animals. Just being alone itself is a kind of stressor in a way.
Right.
So being, we've seen this with our retreats, that essentially the quality of social connection that you feel, an immense factor in how confident you are in movement and how kind of much you can scale up. And obviously there's also seeing other people move and sort of fighting that. And mood, being played
Right.
with people,
Mm-hmm.
sort of probably some of these hormonal systems, they compete with the fear system, whereas with
Mm.
the system, it's a little bit less competition.
Yeah, I think so too. I think having the factor like there's other people around you makes the fight or flight aspect a little bit more less, and it you can be a little bit more courageous, I guess.
Mhm. Yeah. 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 I mean, partially it's practical, right? Like people can support you if you get it.
Right.
Um, but also a lot of it, I think, is just regulating your nervous system through the presence of other people and being
Mm.
able to access, you know, a different state of consciousness. I've
Mm.
noticed that like most of my injuries have happened when I've been feeling pretty fatigued and not
Mm.
grooved in. And
Right.
sometimes I'm in this space where like I just feel invincible because it's like if the mental state is there,
Mm.
you're just tuned in. You kind of are in control of yourself in a different way.
Mm.
And sometimes I'll go out for a session, I'm tired, feeling tired, but I'll like have a friend who's coming to visit who I know I'm really excited to move with. And I'll be like, oh, it'll be okay. Because once I give them a hug and we chat a little bit, I'll be excited. And it's like, boom, ready to go.
Mm. Like your body kind of knows, right? It's like, nah.
Whereas if I had to do that session on my own, I might just like turn around and go home. Like, hey, I'm sometimes that's the right decision, sometimes.
Right.
Wow. Okay. So did you live in the States for a little while? I feel like I remember.
Yes.
So you're in Japan, kind of building the parkour community over there, and you come to the States. Was that for school?
Yes. So before going to the States, after graduating high school, because I was kind of sick and tired of the Japanese culture. There's a lot of great things about Japan, like traditional martial arts or like traditional Japanese arts, and you know, there's some good cultures about Japan, but there's the other aspect where they try to refine you into this like little mold. There's a thing in Japan that says the nail that sticks out get hammers down kind of culture. So I didn't want to be in a society where you go into the public transportation and everybody's eyes is just dead. So I just wanted to get the heck out of Japan for the longest time. So after graduating high school, I went to Australia for 4 months to just only to like learn English because I wanted to go to school and somewhere else like Europe, United States. And then I took a gap year to go to this place called Overwork Gymnastic High School, which I've ended up working as a teacher after college. But I was in the power tumbling and circus performance arts department to just like learn. I just wanted to be a beast in everything. And back in the days, like when I graduated from high school, that's when like Damian Walters came out.
Yeah.
And I watched Damian Walters. I'm like, wow, this guy is like crazy. And I kind of like researched his background. And I was like, okay, he's a power tumbler. So if I learn power tumbling, maybe I can like get something out of it,
Power, P-O-W-E-R, power tumbling?
Yep. Power tumbling, yeah. It's like a sport where it's primarily backwards tumbling.
Yeah.
And you have this like really hard but really bouncy rod floor that you need to do something in.
Super long kind of trampoline.
Yeah, basically. But it's like really hard, so unless you have like a proper technique, it kind of crushes your body kind of thing.
Okay. I played around on the gymnastics gym that I used to work out couldn't afford a rod floor, so he built his own rod floor out of
Oh, no way.
So we had actually like skis that had been sawed off on the ends that had been put in a line and then like standard gymnastics foam. It worked really well. Now,
Wow,
main places where I was learning my standing backflip back in the day.
that's cool. I never heard of that. That's dope.
Gordy Violet, if you're watching, much respect for the skill.
That's genius, man. Yeah, much respect, sir. That's awesome. But yeah, anyways, after that, well, I was always interested in biomechanics and medical science.
Yeah.
So I decided to study while I was in the performance school in Ullerup, to go to a college in the United States. And I was like searching different schools, and my main criteria was it's not gonna rain that much. And
Denmark.
yeah, not Denmark. Denmark is it gets gloomy and cold during winter. But it's awesome though. But yeah. And then my second criteria was they have a strong medical school or like physical science or kinesiology program.
Yep.
And my third one is there's a close enough gymnastics gym that I can go and play around, or a parkour gym.
Yeah.
And the fourth one was they had a strong hip hop dance team.
Oh, cool.
Is when I was in Denmark, I started dancing for my parkour.
Yeah.
To like learn how to flow better. So a lot of people in Japan thinks I flow really well.
Yeah.
And they come learn from me how to flow, but that's mostly because I done hip hop. Not only parkour.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've definitely noticed that you have a very uniquely creative flow style in your training.
Right.
Yeah. I have not trained hip hop. I want to. I've done some capoeira.
Oh, no way.
Some slow and smoothness and rhythmic qualities to my movement, but hip hop has such an insanely complex relationship to beat that anything else goes quite as sophisticated as hip hop does in the relationship to rhythm.
Definitely. I think there's a difference between rhythmicality and musicality. Rhythmicality is more like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, right? Even capoeira, 1 and 2 and right. It's just like really depend on the on-beat and the off-beat. Whereas musicality is you need to understand there's an outlier or a moment between the in beat and the out beat with the music. So you learn how to move your body with any kind of beat or any kind of sound or quality of a sound around you, which gives you, how do you say it in English? Kankyu, stop and go kind of feeling, you know. It's not like you move. It's more like you move and maybe you stop for a while, but it feels sound. It's basically like being able to control yourself within high and low speed, and high beat and low beat. So that's the uniqueness. I think contemporary dance has a similar thing too. Like hip hop and contemporary dance has that quality of musicality where that other sports or dance backgrounds lack. I mean, it's okay because traditional dancing, you don't really need it that much because it's all technique, right?
My sense, my understanding, I could be wrong. This is something like you have jazz, which comes out of like, various traditions and swing and all that, which ends up kind of becoming hip hop, or hip hop evolves out of those, and
right.
Ballet becomes modern. Contemporary is sort of like that classical tradition, but then picking up all of the influences out of the folk dancing that developed into hip hop in particular. But pretty much whatever else is out there. That's my sense of what contemporary is it's sort of classical that's fusing itself with everything else.
Most definitely. I think that's why it's called contemporary dance. Is it's new kind of dance. I think the beautiful thing about contemporary dance is that you can actually develop your own style. Also with hip hop. So there's this word in Japanese called onkochishin.
Okay.
which means understanding of something traditional and something old, and deriving something new out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually like one of the primary things that I do with my work as well. Like everything with parkour, everything with ninjutsu, which I practiced for a long time, and also with dancing.
So did you start ninjutsu in your teens, or did you have a martial arts background before parkour, or like how did the martial arts kind of come into your practices?
So I grew up in this place. I went back and forth from Tokyo and Nagano.
Okay.
And Nagano, where it's like one of the main ninja clans come from. So I grew up going to this like ninja experience places
Mm-hmm.
like for like longest time. And then when I came back to Tokyo, I met up with this dojo people called Bujinkan.
Yeah.
Which is like Grandmaster Hatsumi, and that's where I started with my ninjutsu, and combined with whatever I learned from Fighting Monkey, Yosef and Linda, whatever I learned from parkour, and made it into this like new thing. That's why my Instagram account is called Shinobi Mover.
Okay.
Because I'm my primary thing is parkour and ninjutsu, which makes me a modern shinobi. But I combine Ido Portal method, or even like Fighting Monkey within that dogma, and use kinesiology and medical science as like a, how do you say, something that connects it all with like evidence.
Yeah. I was just gonna tell the audience, in case people don't know, Shinobi, that's actually the traditional pronunciation of the characters that are now pronounced ninja, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Ninja is something that's came afterwards, like via movies or manga. But originally they were called shinobi or suppa, which basically means somebody who hides or somebody who lurks in the shadow.
I think it's funny. Everything like American Ninja Warrior is huge here, right? We go to
Right.
camp, which is great, but I'm always like, what does all this swinging from obstacles have to do with killing people?
I don't know, but I mean, there is a part of that in ninjutsu though. So like what we see in parkour, even Ninja Warrior, it is a part of a ninjutsu, but it's a very, how can you say, it's just a corner of what we do. So there's this art called tonjutsu, which means art of running away or art of infiltrating. And within that, there's like mokutonjutsu, which is like using like the trees or any kind of like rocks or like to do. Yeah, exactly. It's basically parkour or your stuff, man. Climb, jump over, whatever. And then there's a suitonjutsu, which is basically swimming. You learn how to hide within water. Katon is like explosives, using fire to kind of escape. Doton is like hiding under the earth, right? So you dig a hole and like try to go in there, and those kind of stuff. And Kinton is using the metal, right? So using metal sounds or using metal to dig up something. So like the 5 elements, right? It's all these like running away techniques is based on the 5 elements. And if you master,
so you have like fire, water, air, wood, metal. Is that
metal? Yeah. And then
different 4 element systems, 5 element systems, 6 element systems. So
yeah, it's different, and it's all like connected to like yin and yang, how you kind of portray the world. So it's all correct and all how can you say, it's related to each other. But some is more related to the earth, which is 6 elements. Some is more related to the 5 elements, which is like human, actually. Because when you look at the human body, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? With the 5 limbs. And then the 4 elements is actually um, it's derived based on the weather and how the seasons changes.
Mm. Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah. So, anyways,
Yeah. So
then
for a second too, so you're doing parkour in your teens.
sorry, I just
Jitsu at the same.
go
No, it's okay. You're doing jitsu at the same time, or you just start
kind of
kind of off and on?
off and on. And then when I came back to Japan as an adult, I dive into it even deeper.
Okay.
hmm
When you were in Europe, though, you were also learning like acrobatics, and then
Yes.
you were studying hip hop.
Yes, hip hop. Because this is a funny story. So in Olerup, there's different lines, right? So I was in the power tumbling and also performance tumbling line. And then there's a dance line and there's like a rhythmical dancing and those kind of stuff, right? And there's this really cute girl in the dance line. And every weekend, everybody like goes out to like the bus to go to like the local town to party in like these nightclubs. And young Masa was like, if I dance really well and if I can like bust out some moves in a dance circle, maybe this girl will be interested in me.
There we go. It's not a bad.
Right? So I learned how to like pop, lock, break dance just because I wanted to like bust out some moves in the dance floor so I can like be friends with this girl.
But that worked
But
out.
what? Sorry?
How'd that work out for you?
I became friends, but it was just friendship, right? I was totally friend zoned. But no, it's good though because you know, that me doing that ended up getting recruited with a pretty strong street dance crew
Oh, cool.
locally,
Mm-hmm.
which made me go into like different kind of world championships as like a beginner. But I had a parkour background, so I could use my acrobatic skills combined with a beginner b-boying to make it look cool.
Nice.
So that's how I got into it.
Yeah. So when do you get back to Japan?
Oh, that was 8 years later.
Okay.
So I went to Australia, Denmark, and then United States for 4 years.
Where were you in the States?
I was in Santa Barbara.
Santa Barbara. Okay.
Santa Barbara,
You
yeah.
weren't that far away.
Sorry?
I remember you weren't that far away. It was like
No.
across, but they somehow didn't.
Well, because, back in the days, I was this young college kid who wasn't really interested that much in education in a way. I was more interested in being a beast. So I didn't really reach out to that many communities. In a way, because, when you're young, you can be very egotistical.
Yeah.
Right? So I think, and I was like more power hungry. So, back when I was in college, I was more interested in climbing the ladder through WFPF.
Okay.
Which is, now that I think about it, a little bit dumb, but yeah. So I didn't really train with that many people, and I didn't really go out that much besides Santa Barbara, LA. I keep going back and forth, Santa Barbara, LA, train in Tempest, come back home, train again, that thing, which I kind of regret because there's a lot of great communities around United States.
Yeah.
That I could have like go over and learn different kind of cultures, different kind of movement, but I was very interested in just going to competitions and like those kind of stuff.
Yeah, we were doing the first. What time was this around? When were we in Santa Barbara?
2010 to 2014.
Yeah. So we were putting on the first like invitational competitions.
Okay.
Versions of 2011, 2012, 2013.
Right.
Frosty and Fresh on Snow and Paul Whitecott and all those guys coming out doing our competitions. Those were the competitions that inspired Renee and Tom to create the Spell Parkour League.
Oh, really? Oh my gosh, that's like because I remember watching those.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, I want to do that too.
Yeah.
Man, like
short hop from LA to Seattle on a plane. It's like 3 hours, 4 hours.
Right, right. Man, someday I would love to go out to Seattle, man. Like, there's looking at this. Isn't those like what was it? The one that looks like a little rock and stuff. It's in Seattle, right?
Like fuck. Yeah.
Yeah, man, that's mind blowing. Jesus.
I love that. It's not my favorite part. Because like it looks beautiful, but there's really not that much variety of options. It's very like linear, right? It's like
Oh, right.
loops and gaps. Whereas Gasworks Park, it's
Mm.
funky and weird and has all kinds of shapes. So it creates
Oh.
way more interesting shapes for me. So if I go down and I'm going to train urban, I will go to Gasworks personally. But then my favorite thing about going to Seattle is all the nature spots, the
Right.
discovery and big trees. That's what I'm all about. But that's my thing.
You
Good.
Yeah, you know what's really interesting in terms of like movement and in terms of parkour or anything, right? I think when you are developing a certain kind of movement, there's a huge difference between organic structures and non-organic structures, which hugely influence how you move.
Mhm.
Because if you move in a non-organic structure, your movement and how you think becomes very linear,
Yeah,
right?
it's fascinating. Like, so I pretty much stopped training in urban spots and in the gym in 2013, just training
Okay.
exclusively in nature for a long time. One movement, for instance, that I like never really did for the longest time was climb ups, like a custom
Mm.
parkour climb up. You almost never find a perfectly flat out wall with a perfectly flat top in nature. What you'll find is either something that's like rounded on top and maybe cut under the bottom, and like it's way too hard to do a climb up, or it'll be slightly slanted where your feet
Right.
easier than a climb up.
Mm.
So I still think the climb is actually a really good movement to master, and that once you master it, a lot of these things that happen in nature are quite are a little bit more intuitive. You have some more options.
Mm.
But yeah, I did like 10 years without really being able to work on my climb ups that much. Now I have this ninja gym that I train at, and finally dialing the climb ups in, which feels good. But it's interesting because there's all these things like lots of cat backs at the ninja gym, and just like, I would find a cat back little bar in nature.
Right.
Like, the likelihood of that kind of thing is very low, but it's fun. It's really cool. It's nice to build up these options that I didn't have. So, because of some injuries and family reasons.
Right.
Take my kids to the gym a lot of
Right.
nature, just as far as management of the children.
Right.
I've been going into the gym, so I've been like my Kong precisions are getting strong, and dive Kongs and big swings and things. And then I went out to train. I've been slowly transitioning my training back outdoors again. I was out training this week on some like driftwood logs and trees, and we were doing a run down, sort of like a slight diagonal, so that we have one log that's sort of diagonal, and there's a gap to another log that's not quite perpendicular, but
Right.
land on it and then turn and run down it, and then you have these two stumps that you have to take off of that are kind of awkward.
It's like boom.
Yeah, into a gap to a tree that's bent over the beach. So it's a really cool line. But the landing and turning on that foot was really challenging because I'm coming off a couple of ankle injuries. I was just thinking about how there's not, like, when I'm in the gym, there's nothing like that really, where I'm having to deal with these weird, funky shapes. And deal with change of direction in the middle of a jumping line in the same way. I mean, I'm doing change of direction stuff in the jumping lines, but somehow I was like, wow, this really feels like the type of challenge that I get only in nature.
Definitely.
And that makes for basically a more gyroscopic, agile lower body, for sure.
For sure.
I train a lot at a creek that has all these falls.
Yes.
Not,
I seen your videos with that, man. That's cool.
yeah, it's a good creek.
I mean, it's like well, like going back to your ankle injuries and like between the gym versus nature, I think it's highly related to whether you can use a reaction force. There's action force and reaction force, right? And whereas like a wall, you can get like a huge amount of reaction force because force comes in, the equal amount of force comes out. Whereas nature, everything is just organic, and also like the angle that you need to put your shins is very different. So you need to really like adapt your shin angle and your axis in order to match the shape of whatever obstacle the nature provide in order to launch yourself, right?
Yeah, there's just a lot more variation. So
Yeah.
to prevent slipping,
Mm.
being able to control your shin angles and your angle from your foot to your hip is really key. And so classically, if someone's used to training on concrete all the time and they're like doing a jump, if you take them out on a like wet, mossy creek, they're really likely to slip out because they just don't understand that you can't take as aggressive a penultimate step or a last step or an ultimate step for that matter in a jump. So when you're trying to create that big ground reaction force by reaching out with your foot and slamming into the ground, just doesn't work in that situation. Step more neutrally. And then if you might be on pretty much just flat ground or flat walls, have like obviously just going straight down on flat ground, and I mean not straight down out in front, but not side to side.
All right.
And then on a flat wall, there's like pretty much the same angle that you're going to use every time. But if you're a bunch of rocks that are slightly slanted in different ways, there's this whole spectrum that has to get filled in of what the angle of the body compared to the foot is to get you the best traction, best force production against that. So it feels like after a session there, you feel like you've trained all these like ankle stabilizers, knee stabilizers, hip stabilizers in a way that you're not getting from a session in the gym.
Totally. And I feel like this is like my performance coach perspective, is that I think more non-parkour athletes, maybe a fighter, maybe it's a tennis player, basketball player, should maybe go more into nature and to move your body, especially contact sports athletes.
Yeah, I mean, I think parkour athletes should spend more time in nature too. Like it's just more nutritious for your body. You're getting more, a broader spectrum developmental package across all of the tissues and for the nervous system. It's more environment. It's a richer environment. It's more perceptively enriched. It's more, it's also more perceptually challenging, like your vision. More sound if you're out in nature and you're like around waterfalls, right? Like being around that really intense sounds can actually be very interesting to try to orient and be able to stay focused on what you need to focus on.
Right.
Orientation challenges is really interesting. That was one of the things that was interesting coming back to training in nature, was running down the creek and feeling like my eyes were actually bigger. Like eyes obviously the same size, but there was this sense that my optical nerve and the area of my brain that was devoted to seeing had to work so much harder in this environment because of the contrasting light, dappled light coming down into the creek, and then also the huge variation in like green and brown and gray color acting with it tells you whether you can put your foot down safely in this space.
Right.
So it's like running down the creek was like as much a workout for my sensory system as it was for my legs, in a way that's very different from what I was experiencing in the gym.
It's probably gym is like the same light, same environment, same everything.
Yeah,
you get used to it.
It's the same color, it's one flat color, one flat surface. You can trust it. If your foot moves 4 inches forward on something, it's not that big a deal. You can adjust. But like when you're out in nature, like half an inch can mean you just completely botched the jump.
For sure. Because like I train in nature too, especially when I go back home in Nagano.
Yeah.
Nagano is like this huge mountain town city, and growing up as a kid, I you know moved around in the mountains, like jumping around, maybe like cutting the wood with the axe, and yeah, that I think that was huge as a child development. I think like growing up in nature is, I think every child should go to nature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every human needs nature. That's fine.
Yeah.
So I'm curious just to divert so you tore your Achilles tendon when you were at Olarup?
Yes. So I was a teacher at Olerup for 3 years.
Yeah.
And back in the days, I was very ambitious.
Yeah.
I wanted to get like every piece out of the small situation. So I was a teacher, but I was also like training myself a lot to become like the best athlete I can be. And also I got really into dancing, right, over years. So I wanted to be a professional parkour athlete, but at the same time, I wanted to be a professional dancer. So I did like professional dancing and professional parkour all at the same time. So I was also in a dance company, right? And well, basically, now that I think about it, like looking back in the days, I think I overworked myself in a way. Not that like I didn't take care of my body. I did. I conditioned, I stretched, everything. But I think my energy surplus and my mentality, I guess, was very drained without me noticing.
Yeah.
So I think that's when I did whatever I did. Basically, what I did was I did a Kong vault straight into a wall and did like a inward front flip in the wall.
Yeah.
And it was actually during like afternoon class, right? So I was teaching my students, my more advanced students, okay, this is how you like do like a Kong to inward front flip. This is where you need to angle yourself. You need like what you need to do this. Hey, like I forgot his name, but there's one student. Maybe it's a good idea for you to actually film me do it, so that you guys can actually watch it later, right? And while I was like trying to like demonstrate the perfect form so that they can like watch it and like rewatch it and try to imitate me, that's when I
Upped it. Yeah.
Yep.
I tore my Achilles in 2010 on a wall run.
Oh shoot.
It was a series of strides out in nature, running up. It was a 16-foot slanted wall up in Squamish in BC, and I was doing 3 strides in a row on these big rocks into it, but it forced me to do it on my off leg. So it was, and I'd just been overtraining, so my ankles were just screaming for a break, and I was getting all these weird pains and popping and cramps in my feet and calves all the time. I told myself this is the last big training session before I take some rest. And took a lot of rest.
Right.
Yeah, I've never taught myself inward fronts because I know too many people have torn their Achilles on them.
It's one of those tricks that's, how can you say, it looks cool, but it's just not a good idea. But
especially if you're doing it off of both ankles, so that time of force production is really limited, and the angles, and especially out of a Kong, just that's an insane ask of an Achilles tendon.
Yeah, but like back in the days, like I thought, because nowadays a little bit less, but back in the days, like as a Japanese athlete, like I had very good technique. Like very clean flips, very clean precisions, very clean everything, right? So in the back of my head, I was like, I'm really clean. So if I do a technique very perfectly, I will never injure myself, which is stupid.
Like that, no.
Right?
I'm convinced that most of the injuries are overuse injuries. Right.
I agree.
Over fatigue ourselves. We don't give ourselves enough rest. We don't listen to the signals from the body that it needs rest.
Like that's what, like, when I tore my Achilles tendon, they told me, like, you can hang a car off a healthy Achilles tendon, it's not going to tear. Like, it tears because there's too many micro tears that have been left unhealed from too many people
Right.
haven't fully recovered from.
Mm.
So what you see is almost every time when someone tears the Achilles tendon, they had a recent increase in training volume. So the training volume goes up for a period of time, and it's not, it's okay to increase your training volume, but it has to be stepwise.
Mm-hmm.
My big problems with some of the coaching that goes on in movement culture is, like, you take an athlete and you're like, okay, well, you're going to train 30 hours a week. Yeah. We've been training 2 hours a week. Guaranteed injury.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And I think it's bad mentality as well, actually. Because so when I was a teacher at Overwork, I went through Achilles tendon. I tore my Achilles tendons, and then I also burned out at the same time. So, and I think like the reason why those two things happen is because I went to, like, kinesiology, kind of like pre-med kind of situation, like studying and training, and I kind of needed to, like, study 80% of my time and train 20%. Right? Because English was my second language, and learning those gnarly biomechanical, medical, what was it, organic chemistry kind of crap was just a lot as a second language.
I'm sure.
No worries.
I'm sorry.
No worries, man. But yeah, so I think when I was a teacher there, like, crazy facility, I have, like, the most of my time available for me. Of course, I was just like, and I was also happy making parkour my full-time job.
It's really exciting to be able to do.
Yeah.
So
Anyway.
So I'm curious, because you already have a dance background, you already have a martial arts background, you have a parkour background. At some point, you start to take on the idea of movement as practice, movement practice as something distinct from those practices that you already have. And you've talked about Fighting Monkey being your big influence, but did it start with Fighting Monkey, or were you influenced by, like, the Ido Portal explosion of movement culture before that?
Well, it was actually both at the same time, and it was based on my torn Achilles.
Mm-hmm.
So I tore my Achilles, and I was in this, like, a huge cast, but still dancing, still doing parkour. And one of my crewmates in the dance company that was in was, he was like, hey, have you heard of, like, this thing, like, called movement, or, like, Ido Portal, Fighting Monkey? And all of them were, like, connected somehow, like, all at the same time, because it was around, like, 2014.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, like, when the whole movement culture was getting to get known, but wasn't that big yet.
Yeah.
So with a torn Achilles, that's when I took my first Fighting Monkey. That's when I met, like, Tom Wexler. Yeah. And my thought process was like, okay, like, I learned a lot about medical science and a lot of the Western way of thinking, right? I have a martial arts background, I have dance background, I've done a lot of parkour. But if I keep training and keep doing what I've been doing, even though I think I'm doing something right, there's something that I might be missing.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that movement practice offered so much variety and so much answers that was unanswered just by doing what I've been doing. So in order to continue to become a professional athlete and a professional performer, I made a decision to do movement. Also because my physio, my doctor, everybody was like, hey, even if you recover, you won't be able to do the same performance before your injury. Mm-hmm. And as a, like, top level professional athlete, you should probably consider a career change, which sucked, right? So, but I didn't want to. I wanted to keep doing what I've been doing. Mm-hmm. So that's my motivation to kind of get into movement.
Were you able
And
to recover fully?
I did. Honestly, my power level is different from like back in the days and now because I used to be pretty explosive. But like my mobility and my sense of coordination, my interconnection, and my movement quality, I feel it's way better now than back in the days because of movement.
Sorry, it's interesting because I was able to get all of my power back and more. My broad jump was 9 feet 7 inches before the battle. 2 years after my Achilles tear, I was 9 feet 9 inches. Or actually, I think I did.
Wow,
So I was just short of the 10-foot club.
that's interesting.
And so I really believe, and I think it's really tragic when they tell athletes that you can't come back fully because if anything, I would say that the Achilles tendon injury side is healthier and stronger and more mobile than the other side. There's probably a tiny bit of like at the very terminal aspect of plantar flexion, it's not quite as strong, maybe the last 5%, but it doesn't impact its explosiveness at all.
Right.
Hair
Well,
off that leg.
for me, what's really interesting is that my sensory, so my power level is actually I'm way stronger. Right, my power level is way stronger, and I'm more flexible actually in my left Achilles. And everything, but my pinky toe still till this day doesn't move.
Yeah, interesting.
And what I notice is that yes, everything's recovered. I feel great, but in a way, my neural impulse is different than it used to be. So the brain signals what it offered. I think one of my biggest strengths back in the days was I think and immediately I can do,
Yeah,
right? Whereas after I tore my Achilles, I feel like there's a slight delay in command to execute, which made my power level bit lower.
you think
I
that's
have more control.
like a neurological injury, or do you think that was more like just now you're aware of how badly you can get injured and your brain more of a governor on your movement?
I think it's both. I think it's both neurological and also a governor. And I'm getting older as well.
Yeah, I know that's like I was older than you, I guess, when all this happened because I think I'm about 10 years older than you.
Mm-hmm.
So I was 20. I was 28 when I tore my Achilles.
Okay.
So I was able to come back and be a super power athlete at 30, 31.
Right.
And then it's like, it's just kind of not as interesting to just try to keep pushing it. It was like, it's not that much more satisfying to do a 13 and a half foot wall run than a 13-foot wall run. Or out further, it was like, I was just in love with moving in the trees and like finding these routes and like finding that subtle footwork and all that stuff that made it beautiful. So it was like, that's where I ended up devoting my time. And I think that's just part of growing older as an athlete, as there's that point at which you can get more powerful so easily. And it opens so many things up. But then there's a point at which it's like, it's harder to get more powerful. It's not get more powerful just because you got older, but because you've squeezed the juice out of that lemon. You got to go squeeze some other lemons. And then you don't stay so interested in that lemon anymore because you find these other lemons taste pretty good too.
For sure. I mean, honestly, that's so crazy because I was in the exact same mindset. Because when I tore my Achilles, I think I'd done parkour for around like 11 years, 12 years ish. And I was like, okay, I climbed this mountain.
Yeah.
And I'm a small dude. I'm like maybe 167 centimeters, which is like 5 feet something.
5 feet 6, 5 feet, probably 5, something like that. I'm 1.7, so I'm about 20 centimeters taller than you.
Yes. So like I'm a small dude, but I can jump far and do like explosive tricks back in the days, right? But I was like, okay, I climbed this mountain to a certain level,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't feel like I can do this for the rest of my life. So it's a good opportunity to create something that's completely original and completely me.
Yeah.
Because what I did was like what everybody else did. You know, big jumps, big tricks. It was about like how many rotations you can do and how many twists you can do and how far up a double Kong and Kong free you can do, you know?
Yeah.
And everybody done that.
Yep. Yep. I was developing the ideas that became Evolve Move Play starting back in 2005, 2006. Because
Wow.
I had the martial arts background, and I always wanted to bring the martial arts and the parkour together.
Mm.
I had a love for nature, so I wanted to take it into nature. And also, like, I'd read all this epic literature, and so I like remembered an ethnographic literature. So I remembered stories about people doing parkour like stuff out in nature. So that was always intriguing to me. And then I discovered Georges Hébert and Méthode Naturelle.
Right.
Started working with Erwin. I was on World Mechanics. But then I left the MoveNet project and just focused on parkour. So in 2011, so I tore my Achilles tendon in July of 2010.
Wow.
And I met Ido
Mm.
2000 in January, I think, of 2011.
Young Ido.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I was already sort of developing the ideas. At the time, I called it evolutionary athletics. And so when I met Ido, I was talking to him about the ideas of what would become Evolve Moves Play. And then a year later, I spent some time with him in Toronto, and he kind of was like, followed my footsteps, kicked me out on the road, told me to go teach workshops. But so yeah, 2011, 2010, or 2012, I'm coming out with Evolve Move Play. Simon Tacker's got Ancestral Movement. Yosef and Linda have Finding
Monkey.
It's cool because like that early gen of movement culture was much more open source and much more like all these different kind of ideas that were more sort of democratic. And then Ido's star just sort of exploded, and then everything just got associated with Ido, right?
Yeah.
Everyone else who had been part of the early conversation sort of got shoved to the side to a significant degree, just in the public perception, at least.
I think it's back in the days, an early stage of movement culture, when you started and when I came in as a trainee.
Yeah.
There was more cross dynamics. You know, everybody learned from everybody, right? And we were less of a fanboy. We were more devoted performers, devoted athletes, devoted researchers who wanted to utilize movement practice to develop our own craft and develop ourselves more as a human being. I feel like, I'm not sure if this is a good thing to say, but I'll say because I'll be honest. I think nowadays a lot of the movement is associated more of a idealism or fanboyism or a certain dogma, which, in my understanding, is different from where a lot of people back in the days came into movement. You know, because we didn't really care about how we should look. You know, we were more interested in how we can develop the human being, right? How far we can push it, how deep we can go. So it's really it's cool, but also disappointing at the same time to see a lot of people who can't come into the movement culture nowadays, that they are trying to become something that they're not. You know, a certain shape, a certain skill. But how can you differentiate, for example, I don't know, like doing a climb up and maybe doing a backflip? How can you tell which skill is better than each other? Right? Or like maybe you do a one-hand handstand or a one-arm pull-up. Okay, that's cool, but how can you confidently say that that is a better movement than getting a black belt in jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, I
You know?
I've written quite a bit about this. You can check out an essay that I have on what it means to be a generalist mover. I've also had a few different Ido Portal sort of students who split and gone their own ways, like Rodrigo Lima and Brendan Zerlu on the podcast
Cool.
talking about this specific topic. I'm pretty critical of the prioritization
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of movement culture as far as how well it achieves the goal of being.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think like the one arm handstand, for instance, I think it's an appropriate goal for 99.99. I mean, it literally, I don't think it's an appropriate goal for anyone who's not a hand balancing professional.
Or circus athlete.
Okay. I talked to my friend, Yuri Marmerstein, who's a great hand balance acrobat. And I asked him, like, okay, tell me, what the process was to get the one arm handstand. He said, train it for 2 to 3 hours a day for 2 years.
Whoa. Just 1 hour.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, think about what that would have gained you if you'd spent it on jiu-jitsu.
A lot.
Right? It's like, if you went into jiu-jitsu for 3 hours a day, so if your body survives it, right? Say 6 days a week for 2 years, it's got to be a purple belt, right?
Yeah.
Right. Would you, and then the cross transferability, like the domains in which a purple belt in jiu-jitsu is useful versus
so much
versus a one arm handstand or 2 hours a day of rock climbing, right?
Oh my gosh.
Superhuman, right?
Definitely.
Or of course, right?
Totally.
So that was like, okay, this is not an appropriate goal. But I brought all this up because you were talking about how you were doing all the kongs and the stuff and all that because it was sort of like that was what it meant to be good.
Yeah, that's the thing to do.
Yeah.
That's what everybody see.
I just recently, my Facebook served me a memory of the goals that I had written in 2012. So I at the time we were trying to figure out how to do goal setting effectively. The whole idea of really knowing what your goals was new. So my friend Stephen Lowe, who wrote Overcoming Gravity, had introduced really the idea of SMART goals, specific, actionable,
right,
actionable, realistic, time sensitive.
Right.
So I wrote out this set of goals, and so my goals were, it was something like run a 40-yard dash in 4.6 seconds, 36-inch vertical leap, straddle plunge.
Oh shoot.
5 strict bar muscle ups. Let's see, and then we win a bunch of parkour competitions.
It's like young Ruffy.
Yeah. And I looked back on it, and at the time, I felt like a failure because after that year, I hadn't achieved most of those goals. And I looked back and I was like, holy shit, I made so much progress, right? Because I went from a 13.5 second 100 meters to a 12 second 100 meters. So not 40, because I went and trained with an actual track team. So
right.
Hundreds instead of, but that was a massive.
That's massive. Oh my gosh. Definitely.
33-inch vertical leap, right? I could do 5 strict wing muscle ups, could do 1 split bar muscle up, closing in on a 10-foot broad jump. And I was like, man, these are not particularly well aligned goals, and it's way too many to be trying to work on at one time. So if I'd hired Ido, he would have told me too many goals. Might have been useful for me at the time. But yeah, one thing was wow, I actually made really good progress if I had understood in context just how all those things were to achieve and how unlikely it is to improve at all of them at once. Great. The other thing that happened in 2012 was that, so I competed in 2011. Yeah, 2011 was like the big year for me as a competitive parkour athlete, where I went to I went to the Apex International and I ran competitions and ran in them. I did all right. I was not the world's best parkour athlete, right? But I was solid. And I was improving. But when I went into the next year, I realized that all the competitions were going to take place in gyms. And I was just sick of being in the gym, and I was in love with moving in the trees. And so I every time I'd be like, should I go train in the gym, prepare, do some strides on rails, get used to the type of stuff I'm going to face in competition. Or am I going to go train in these trees? So I end up going to train in the trees every time. And it shows what I loved and what my goals were.
Right.
I couldn't do a straddle planche, and I couldn't do a handstand for a minute, and I didn't even compete. And I was like, wow. I looked back and I was like, I'm so much more interesting as the guy who didn't achieve those goals than the guy who did that. They would have been really impressive if I could do those things.
Right.
Impressive in a way that's like a generic YouTube movement influencer, right?
Oh yeah, definitely, man. And I think what it is that you and I, we are ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. Which is great, but the harmful thing about social media is that you see so many information, so many things that comes at you. It's like almost like information overload, and it makes you feel like the grass next door is a lot more greener.
Oh yeah.
Whereas, I think what makes a human being very easy to like is the people who understands themselves and understands where their happiness comes from. Because being good at something or achieve your goal doesn't necessarily mean that you're actually happy.
Yeah.
And I feel like being happy and loving life has way more value than being some kind of beast in something,
Yeah. I had a conversation with AJ Roberts, who's a powerlifting world record at Paleo FX a few years ago. And he basically told a story where he said, when he broke the squat world record for the first time, it took him 2 years to build up to it. And he's about 5'9", ate enough to weigh 360 pounds. And so
that's a lot.
Yeah. So he ate all the time. He was constantly uncomfortable and having to go to the bathroom and shitting all the time. And he could do a standing backflip. He's incredibly powerful and athletic, but he got winded walking upstairs. Right. And he would go into the gym and torture himself under the weights and go home just absolutely destroyed and aching and in pain and be grumpy and terrible to his girlfriend. Wake up the next morning in terrible pain and just ramp himself up into a rage to make himself go do it again. So he does this to himself for 2 years. Goes up, breaks the world record, and doesn't feel anything. So he decided that, clearly he needed to break the world record twice. So this whole process again for 2 more years, breaks the world record, doesn't feel anything. And I've heard that happens to Olympic winners quite often, right? Entire life is built around the story that winning a gold medal is going to mean everything to them. And then sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't, it's just crushing because their entire identity has been built around it. So in my own work, I've really come to this idea that the ultimate purpose of our movement practices is to give meaning to life. And we have to understand ourselves and actually care for ourselves to understand to actually guide ourselves towards what's meaningful for us. So for me, as it turned out, having handstands really are not very meaningful to me. I achieved a 30-second handstand and it was fun.
Right.
And doing a really beautiful route in a tree makes me happy. Like I look back on routes that I've done and jumps that I did, and it fills me with a sense of like deep gratitude that I got to have that moment.
Mm,
And so that's what I train for, right? Like
mm,
I'm attached to continue to train, to continue to grow, because it just is so damn fun to do when I do it, and because it helps me become a person that I aspire to be the rest of my life.
mm, mm. I think it's so healthy when the practice that you do kind of feeds your energy, whereas it depletes the energy. It's a practice that depletes your energy. It's almost impossible to do that for the rest of your life.
Mhm.
But you know that you're in the right path where when you do a practice, you practice every single day. It's tough. It's not easy work, but after what you do, you feel like you're meant to be doing that, and you get the energy that makes you continue doing whatever you're doing. Maybe it's your work, maybe it's your life, but I think that's the key to having a sustainable practice,
Mhm.
is to have a practice that gives you a certain amount of energy surplus.
Yeah, you need to be banking something out of the practice.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
So I'm curious about how, like for me, I think it's really interesting that the whole idea of movement culture and its relationship to parkour.
Right.
A lot of ways, all the things that kind of come up in movement culture, not all of them,
Mm-hmm.
but so many of them were actually within the practices of the founders of parkour.
Definitely.
Hip hop dance, capoeira, kung fu,
Mm-hmm.
all that like is stuff that the Yamakaze were training
Mm-hmm.
in the 90s, right?
Mm-hmm.
When Ido came out with the like one arm handstand, 1 minute handstand the hard way, I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to send Shao a message and say, do a one arm handstand on the side of or a 1 minute handstand on the side of a building. Show him the parkour way. Because I feel like Shao would do that, right?
Right.
And
Definitely.
I feel like that, how complete and how prescient in so many ways the early expression of parkour was
Mm-hmm.
really undervalued, right? Like
Definitely.
even the nature stuff that I do, like people don't know that David and Yamakaze and Stefan were down training in Fontainebleau, and it's ourselves all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, go back and watch on a Most Jours or Speed Airman, and watch David do this huge freaking laches through this tree.
Mm-hmm.
There was so much of it's there. So I'm always kind of like trying to, like, obviously I created Evolve Move Play. It's my own sandbox where I get to define the concepts.
Mm-hmm.
And within Evolve Move Play, I think of parkour specifically as exploratory locomotor play.
Mm-hmm.
Then I think of parkour also as the base DNA of everything else that I do.
Mm-hmm.
Like parkour provides the grammar that then I apply to the martial arts, that then I apply to playing with objects, right? I don't train martial arts in a traditional Kung way or even like a sports science way exactly. Like obviously deeply influenced by ecological dynamics and motor learning. But I feel like
Right.
that's the fundamental idea of how to approach the practice from a play-based way.
Mm-hmm.
Experience of training parkour.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious for you how you differentiate being a parkour practitioner from a movement practitioner, and how those two things interact for you.
Like, very good question. Can I be honest with you, man?
Sure, of course.
I think I never differentiate myself as a parkour athlete and a movement practitioner.
Okay.
I feel like even when I was doing parkour like professionally, I was had this feeling where I did parkour, but I was still a dancer when I was doing parkour. I was still ninjutsu, like a ninja, shinobi, when I was doing parkour. But I felt the same thing when I was dancing. When I was dancing, I was a professional contemporary dancer, feeling wow, like I feel like I'm doing parkour on the floor, right? Even when I was sparring or using the katana, I'm using the object, but maybe I'm using it in a parkour way.
Yeah.
And it became like, it's not it, in a way, my identity always lied as a mover than a single thing. Because from a very early age as a kid, I noticed that a lot of things cross over with each other, your experience and everything, and makes who you are. Maybe it's the music that you listen to, the people that you hang around, and it gives you a certain amount of flavor, right? And this flavor is different from each other, but it can be always be developed through more experience and more learning and opportunities. So nowadays, I always look through the crossovers and the crossovers between the practices and what makes a practice different. So for example, for me, parkour is innovation, which is very similar to it's a crossover between dance. What makes parkour and dancing very similar is that it's an innovation within an environment, which is beautiful because you can create a line through a canvas of setups. Maybe it's nature, maybe it's the city, but you need to learn how to visualize something and make your visualization into reality. Yeah. Which is the same thing with dancing. You imagine a choreography, you listen to the music, you feel the environment, and you create something, right? Whereas the crossover between ninjutsu and parkour is actually the ability to adapt. So ninjutsu it's not really a martial arts, but it's actually a way of thinking. It's actually the ability to be a shinobi is to have the ability to wear different masks or being a actor of many roles. So you're in an environment, you're in a situation, and maybe you're an athlete at some point. Or maybe if you go into somewhere else, maybe you're a musician, right? Maybe you're a teacher, maybe you're an actor, but it's all depending on the context, and you need to have the brain and mind to easily adapt and think fast, depending on where you are, which is very similar to parkour as well.
Yeah,
you don't have to infiltrate, right? Because you're not a spy, but you need to know how to think fast, depend on the situation that you're in, or else you can't bail, right? There's a difference between failing and bailing, and there's a difference between pretending to be something and actually acting to be something. So for me, ninjutsu and parkour, there's a lot of relativity in terms of adaptation. So, and training in parkour is about logical thinking, right? So it's about biomechanics. It's about mechanical science. It's about computer science, and it's actually understanding the principles of how the world actually works, and to applying into your physical body.
So like a problem-solving activity.
Yeah.
My mentor, John Viveki, introduced this term, the agent-arena relationship, which I really like. Like you're constantly in life trying to frame things so that you have an appropriate agent-arena relationship. So if you imagine that you show up to a tennis court in football gear with a football, you've mistaken the type of arena that you're in. That attunement between the environment and the agent is not properly there.
Right.
So doing when we go out and do parkour is we're attuning to specific environments and learning the potential of them. So in some sense, you can imagine that like what's happening in Ninjitsu is a similar thing, right? You could say that you're abstracting that basic, very physical relationship that the parkour athlete has with the environment
into the environment as a more abstracted thing. The environment of
Yes.
playing a role. Yeah, of the,
Whatever you need to be.
whatever you need to be. But
Yeah.
one of the things that always really struck me about parkour is the sense that it forces you to have a relationship with the truth, right? Like
Definitely.
you can't say I can do that jump if you can't do that jump, right? It's like if you say that and you try, like the truth just smacks you down. And I feel like in our culture, when we live so much in the digital world and we don't do physical things nearly as much as we need them, it's very easy for people to become very disconnected from truth. Something like parkour is just so deeply informational to the body that reality exists outside of you. And if you are wrong in your calculation, you pay the price.
Yeah, totally. I think it's also like it forces you to actually stay true to yourself and actually look into yourself more deeply. Because if you, for example, like we both ignored what our body has told us and what our mind told us, and we paid the price.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So in a way, like parkour, or honestly, like if you do any kind of movement practice, truthfully, it's about being humble and being also innovative. It's also becoming hungry, all the time, and always being true to yourself and others, because if you don't, the practice will smack you down. And it's how it is. That's why I feel like people should talk less and move more. Especially in Japan, man, because in Japan, it's being a performance coach in Japan is very interesting, because not many coaches and performance coach actually moves. They read something in the article, maybe like you guys in the United States do it, and they look at it in the internet and say like, hey, this person said this, so it's probably right. But they never done it themselves, but they use it in their athletes. Where as I feel like you needed to keep true to yourself and constantly do it to yourself before doing it to the others. And I feel like that's where movement practice is so unique, is that, for me, at least in Japan, is that you needed to show it yourself, live it yourself, understand yourself before sharing to others.
Yeah.
Because if you can't do it, you can't teach it.
You don't know, because another great kind of insight from John Rybacki is this idea of the 4 P's of knowing.
Or peace.
There's propositional knowing, which is associated with semantic memory, right? Like must, like a rule, like, keep your back flat on a deadlift. That's a
right.
Then there's procedure, right? So you can tell lots of kids to keep their back straight on the deadlift, and just start to pick it up. They're just going to ground out completely, because the connection between the words and the mind and the actual physical action isn't there, right? Maybe tell someone how to describe how to drive a car to somebody, that they're not going to be able to drive a car.
Right.
Those are the procedures. Procedural. And then there's perspectival, which is like, what is it actually like to experience it? How does the world arrive for you? So when you're driving a car, you have to attune to specific information sources. So that's the agent arena relationship. Participatory is kind of like knowing by being, right? It's associated with the memory that actually gives you a sense of self. And the thing is that it doesn't matter how many articles you read, you're only absorbing propositions. Propositional, right? It has to exist on those other levels. So if you go read the latest sports science and you try to apply it, you actually only know something at a very shallow level.
And there's immense information loss whenever somebody who's brilliant and knows how to coach puts it down in words. This huge source of information that's not there. And if you as a coach then don't go back and practice it and feel it out, you try to apply it to people, you're missing 90% of what actually makes the magic.
Definitely. And you know this philosopher called like Pascal.
I've heard of Pascal. I haven't read
Pascal. I think it's like a French philosopher.
Pascal, yeah.
Yeah. And it's like there's a really famous letter that he sends to his friend, saying that like, hey, I'm sorry that this letter became so long because I didn't have that much time.
Yes.
I feel like if it's something that's only perspective, or like
propositional.
Propositional. The information is copy and paste, so it's not your own true words, right?
Yep.
Where if something is actually lived and actually understand truly, you can choose the right words, and it can be a short word and a short sentence, but it hits very hard.
Yeah, well, you can attune the words to the audience and to the moment, right? So the words that will work in Japanese, like this is, I think, a huge problem in the martial arts, like analogies and images that are very specific to Asian culture.
Yes.
Are ported directly over and are expected to, just like get translated into English and then have the same ability to organize behavior. And they don't. They sound cool and mystical.
Right.
They sound cool and mystical because they don't actually freaking mean anything. And they're Christ.
What's that movie? Yeah, I watched Cobra Kai with my wife, right? And they make this like normal Japanese words look so cool and sound so cool. I'm just like, as a Japanese person, it's kind of cringe because you hear it. I'm like, yeah, but you're just saying like start the fight or like or like do this way, but you're like, and I'm like, okay, like what do you actually want to do?
Yeah, I saw an Indian comedian recently who was like, Westerners don't know what namaste really means, right?
I actually don't know either.
Namaste is like what all the you said. Namaste, and like it's supposed to be something like, may the light of the divine in me recognize the light of the, I don't know, but like it's like the way we use it in India is like sup.
Right. That's funny.
So yeah, so we can mystify things by just using a different language or analogies, lotus flower opening or something like that.
Right.
It's like maybe it's related to kanji and all these things that like have these layers of meaning. So one of the thinkers that I like as far as cueing is this guy named Nick Winkelman, and he has a great book called The Language of Coaching. And in that book, he talks about, I think his PhD research was on external versus internal cues. Attune the athlete to the relationship between themselves and the environment. Internal cues tune you to relationships internal to the body. So tell someone to squeeze their glutes harder during a squat, that's an internal cue.
Right.
Right. If you tell them to thrust their hips forward, right, or drive the bar up, right,
that's external.
That's an external cue. So the cues that he was looking at was in sprinting. So it was like, maintain, get a 45-degree angle on your shin. So that's an internal cue. It's also like the body's just really bad at predicting what angles are. So it's a poor cue in a variety of ways. So then how do you cue someone to maintain a low angle as they're coming out in a sprint start? So he used the cue, take off like a helicopter take off like a jet plane, not a helicopter. So you can imagine a helicopter like this.
Yeah.
Now imagine if you lived in a culture that had neither helicopters nor
jet plane.
No jet planes. But people are like, this has been passed down for 1,000 years as the proper tradition for how we're going to cue. Right? I think that's a lot of what's happening as like
Chinese and Japanese martial arts are pouring over to the West.
Definitely.
Yeah.
How because I'm curious because you've done Japanese martial arts as a kid, right?
I do Tang Sudo, so that's
Right.
Korean. It's actually basically just Shotokan,
Okay.
but it's changed a little bit. But if you look at the history of it, it's who's Masaya? No, Oyama is Oyama Kyokushin, or I can't remember. There's Funakoshi. I don't remember my Japanese masters right now. My brain's too slow.
No worries, man.
But essentially, there were a bunch of Korean students of him who, and they took. Tong Sudo means, I think it means Tong fist way, right? Like Tong Dynasty.
Right. The guy named Tonk.
Well, Tong is in the Tong Dynasty in China.
Oh, okay.
Tong referring to China, and the original karate means Chinese fist, basically, because the idea was that the Okinawans had imported fusion style martial arts into that, and then the Japanese, it gets reinterpreted as empty fist way.
Right.
They don't like the nationalists, and implications when nationalism comes into the East there, and then so the same thing happens with Tang Sudo, and then Tang Sudo becomes Taekwondo. But I did Tang Sudo when I was a kid for a couple of years. Then I went to Aikido, would be the Japanese martial arts, and then so I did learn some of the Japanese terminology, like Jujikatami or
right.
But yeah, I haven't spent that much time in like a true traditional Japanese school.
Okay, but how did it feel like listening to this like Japanese language and even Korean language, like going back and forth in the American context? Very, very interesting.
I've been around a lot of internal martial arts teaching and just dabbled in it or been around people who are into it. And that's really where I have this experience of it. I don't remember being a kid and learning Tang Sudo and we counted in Korean, but I don't remember that. Right.
That's funny.
And, we talked about chi or ki in Aikido, but
what's your understanding of chi actually? What's your image?
Well, I think that it's portrayed in the West often as basically magic energy projection.
Okay.
Like Hadoukens.
Hadouken. Yeah. Right.
I've seen various attempts to explain ki as essentially neural energy concentration. I just don't pay that much attention to it, right? I'm strong. My background is primarily MMA at this point. When I started training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. There's no talk about ki in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Muay Thai. No discussion of that. And then I've done a bit of Russian martial arts, kind of along the line. Well, some Sistema, some other stuff that's related to Sistema, and some Capoeira. And then I've been taught by lots of teachers who have internal martial arts backgrounds, like Joseph,
right,
and Simon. But I've never heard Joseph talk about ki.
No. So it's well, for me, practicing internal martial arts, I feel like chi is very related to thermodynamics and the internal energy in terms of electrons going through the body. So I think it's the warmth or whatever heats that's going on interpret into more of a magical way. It's that how I feel.
Yeah.
Because in Japanese martial arts, they do a punch and then the guy in the back flies away, that kind of shit, right? A lot of it is fake.
Yeah.
But you can punch in a way that you can make the person feel more inside than outside.
Mhm.
And I feel like those stuff is more related to energy production and bone angle more than like magic.
Yeah, absolutely. It's basically how the depth at which you sort of arrest the punch.
Yeah.
And also the kind of, there's different delivery mechanisms for punching. There's different levels of tension that you can hold in your hand. There's different targets. And then you can make a punch more, so the wounding energy of an impact is proportional to the area and time over which it's just.
Yes.
So when you're trying to create a very damaging punch, you want it to essentially be to spike a very high momentary force transient. And so there's a way of tensing at just the right moment as you're impacting that gets the force to arrive much more abruptly. Whereas if the force is distributed more through a push, it's not going to arrive in the body in the same way. There is a Japanese term for that capacity to essentially tense at just the right moment, to be relaxed through the punch and the power production, and then to have the right degree of penetration before the hand gets hard.
It's called I think nukite, something like that.
Yeah,
Maybe.
I don't remember, but yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean though. But you know what's really interesting? What I found traditional martial arts interesting is that it's actually very biomechanic. I think a lot of the movements, even though they say it's chi, it's more related to how well you move your body and how well you transfer energy through the earth to your body to produce energy.
Someone has good chi just means someone is well coordinated and has good muscle synergies.
Yeah, that's what I feel.
Yeah, we just don't. They didn't have the language to describe that, or it's not even necessarily they didn't have the language, but that the symbolism and spirituality were sort of intrinsically linked into the mechanical understanding in a way that doesn't really translate today. So, if you look at like alchemy and things like that, the subjective and the objective were not separated in the same way in the past. And so that's the language that comes out of it. And, most people, I think, real martial artists always understood that, the way that we're talking about chi referred to something that maybe had these symbolic meanings that were available, but those weren't actually the meanings that determined what happened in fighting. But then when it's re-exposed to the West and it's picked up as a form of mysticism, then you end up with these claims that are just very bizarre.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's this word in Japanese called kotsushu nikuju.
Okay.
And I love this word because it's saying that you use your bone alignment more than brute strength, brute muscles.
Yeah.
And that's the secret of cutting through somebody in a very efficient way.
Yeah. I mean, it's just efficient athletic movement, right? Like
it is.
If you're a rock climber, good rock climbers are much, much stronger than bad rock climbers, but they use much less strength to do the same movements. Because they, I actually discovered this recently. I was reading the Inner Game of Tennis. I think I mentioned that.
I have that book. Oh my gosh. That's a cool book.
Great book. He was talking about, right, like, getting out of that, like, instead of telling your body what exactly you want it to do, just pay attention to what it's doing in a specific area. So instead of saying, I want to like grip really hard on my climb up, right? Like rip that wall with your climb up, just like, how does my grip feel? Right? Attend to my grip. And I discovered that I was over gripping when I was doing climb ups, which means that I have too much tension in my arms, which actually slows me down, which prevents speed in the development of the climb up. So I go, okay, well, for years, like the grip was a real challenge. So I'm focusing on just getting more and more force in that grip. It's actually not helping me at this stage.
Mm.
So again, it's like, well, there's a point at which more force is actually inhibitory. And if you work in a grappling context with an untrained person, a big, strong person, they're going to put themselves in positions that are not mechanically strong. They're going to apply extreme muscle tension. They're going to exhaust themselves very, very quickly. Having more muscle force to apply is always useful, but you're always sort of trying within the athletic act to achieve it with less effort.
For sure.
So before we go, I wanted to ask you about how your encounter with Joseph and Linda and Fighting Monkey has impacted the way you train parkour and the way you see that and how those things interrelate for you.
It made me allowed to be more of an innovator than a follower, I guess. And it's all related to my Achilles tendon, but it made me kind of research more about movement and how you use your body within a certain environment or context than following a certain kata or style.
Yeah.
I can say the same thing with my martial arts and also with my dancing. So it made me allowed to explore my own body more than what's told to be good and efficient and traditional. Because like even with punching, maybe like somebody says like a jab should be in this way or that way, right? But I think it allowed me to kind of get out of like what been taught to me and what's supposed to be textbook friendly or like textbook good to what actually matched my personality, myself, and how I should develop myself.
Yeah.
Same thing with parkour, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, so I've done a little bit of training. I've done 1 or 2 workshops with Joseph. I can't remember. And I've talked to him a couple of times. And I see that it's tremendously aligned with like ecological dynamics in the world.
It is.
And Joseph's been a little bit of a mystery man when I push him on that subject. But it seems to me like he's speaking that language more and more in some of the stuff that I put out. But like from the ecological dynamics perspective, the thing is that there's no fundamental jab, right? There are general characteristics that have, that are going to be there, but whether it's optimal to hit with your fist horizontal or vertical or 3/4, it depends on the context. It depends how, what your angle is, where you're coming in from. Like if you think about something like a hook, right? You want to land with your fist horizontal or vertical or even the other direction. Well, that actually all depends on what part of the head you're impacting.
Yeah.
How far your hand is from your shoulder. And you can, and then people's individual anatomy, the angles, the timing, like all this stuff is what actually determines that proper technique. If you go and stand in front of a mirror and practice a punch that, looks textbook, not actually going to be very good at punching people.
Not at all. And it's the same thing with parkour or even dancing, like maybe a Kong should look in a certain way, but it all depends on the context.
Yeah. Like, split steps are ideal when you're taking off of a flat surface that's sort of, continuous. But we all have to switch to a punch when we're taking off of a narrow surface.
Exactly.
And it's long to punch. It's just adaptive within a specific context.
Exactly. And it's also with your mind as well. So, but it's crazy because nowadays a lot of young athletes is more because they're taught in a parkour gym, um the technique is ingrained in their body, right? It's and also like maybe like somebody like a ballet dancer.
Yeah.
The technique is so ingrained that they can't do anything else
Yeah.
besides that technique.
Yeah.
Which was my problem, right? I was so clean at whatever I was doing, but I had nothing else than my own movement.
Yeah, it couldn't be as adaptive. I had a really wonderful athlete that I worked with who's now a cirque performer.
Okay.
Had come from a really strong classical dance background. And she came
Wow.
doing some parkour in the trees with me. And she's really, really strong, really agile, really athletic. But she could not run and not point her toes on every step. Right. It's her running awkward from a parkour perspective. Right?
Yeah.
Extra tension, all of this extra motion that's totally automatized in her, right? But is not adaptive outside of dance performance at all, right? I suppose in cirque performance, it's good for her too. Her lines look nice. But if she was in any kind of athletic performance where it's not aesthetically judged, right? Like soccer, football, baseball, ski racing, parkour racing, chase tag, like none of all of that's just going to get in our way.
Yeah, totally.
That's why my philosophy is like in the preparation of young athletes, we should be focusing not on the aesthetics of skills decontextualized, but on games that teach the fundamental capacity to adapt, which is
most definitely
in Fighting Monkey.
Totally. And I think that's the ability to become anybody, or anything is way more important than mastering a certain skill, because mastering a certain skill, it takes time, but only thing that you need is time.
Yeah.
Right? It's actually not too hard to master a technique if you put the work and time in it. It's way more harder to be innovative, adaptive, and to move within a context, because that takes a certain amount of brain power and softness of mind and a way of thinking, which takes longer to learn, and you need to learn in a certain environment to do that.
Yeah, you want to learn in a variety of environments so that you're attuning to different agent-area relationships. Robert Bickey's work on relevance realization is really, really powerful in kind of understanding why you want to go out and source these types of practices, because of how it attunes you to essentially higher level wisdom generation. So I feel like there was one other thing that I wanted to touch base with you, but I can't remember what it was. So I think that we'll call it there for the day.
All right.
Masa, if folks are interested in your movement and what you're doing, and is there any work that you have coming up, or how should people find you? What should they know about you?
So basically I have this Instagram account called Shinobi Mover, which I update almost daily. Now, I'm gonna have a baby in April 30th, so I'm actually taking a break from yesterday. But if you want to look at like my past work, my workshops, my one-on-ones, I upload almost every day.
Awesome.
So yeah, please check me out there.
Yeah, for a number of our audience is in Japan and is looking for this kind of hybrid movement that respects the games. That's something that I think Masa's doing really well, and lots of beautiful movement, hybridization from dance, parkour, all of it. It's wonderful. I do remember what my last question was for you, so I will go ahead and ask it.
Okay, sure.
Combining all of these elements, the dance element, the parkour element, the games that you're getting from Fighting Monkey, the conceptualization, the body structure stuff, what does a week of training for you look like? I know that can be a difficult question, but like if you try to just get the archetypal week in your mind, how are you going about your practices, and what does a practice look like?
So I train at least 3 hours a day.
Okay.
Every day, as much as possible. Sometimes like when I don't have any work or my wife doesn't need me, maybe like 6 to 8 hours. But I do at least 1 hour of joint articulation or joint control kind of work. Maybe it's the zero forms that Fighting Monkey introduced, or maybe it's like some kind of joint mobilization kind of work that you imagine and you do it. Maybe it's like popping, locking, isolation kind of stuff. Maybe it could be Tai Chi, yoga, but I try to put in 1 hour of practice to move exactly the way I imagined.
Right.
Because that's very important for me.
Yeah.
And then depending on the day, maybe I do parkour, maybe I do dance, maybe I do like an hour like boxing, kickboxing, MMA kind of situation practice. Depending on the day, I do weight training, but it's all depending on how my body feel in the morning after that 1 hour of strict joint articulation. And then I can feel myself and be like, okay, maybe today I need a certain amount of weight training, or maybe I need to do like a certain amount of gymnastics rings, or maybe I need to go out to the gym and just roll around with a couple people.
Yeah. So your parkour training, your martial arts training, and your dance training, are they relatively separated, or is it just sort of kind of a general theme that you're going to?
It's more of a theme, actually.
Yeah.
So maybe like I start to do a parkour training, right? And then it just like turns out to be a parkour dance combined kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then maybe like I go to the gym and start rolling, and then maybe like me and my friends are talking, and it becomes an MMA, or it becomes more of a wrestling than a BJJ. It's very organic. It's very organic. The only strict thing that I do is joint articulation.
I find it interesting because I had a really amazing crew in Seattle who I was working with, who we could kind of really start to integrate all of the things. And then when I moved to Bellingham, like with COVID, everyone moved away from Seattle.
Right, of course.
Here, but primarily I've had access to parkour community. So guys in their early 20s who really are just focused on training parkour. So if I go train parkour, it's just parkour. If I go train martial arts, I'm working with them in the gym and I'm just training martial arts. So I'm trying to get back to that point where it's hybridized in my own practice. And I haven't been practicing dance really at all. And I want to get back to that because there was a period of time when I was dancing a lot with the trees in Seattle.
Oh, no way.
Really wonderful experience. So that's why I was curious how people are doing that, because there is times when you need to kind of narrow what's happening in a session and dive into it. And then there's times when you got to widen it and try to hybridize and intentionally cross-pollinate.
Definitely.
Interesting process to understand when you're sort of pulling the ingredients out and focusing on a single ingredient, and then when you're trying to be like, okay, we're having Mexican Korean food tonight,
It's interesting that you say that. This is a ninjutsu term or ninjutsu ideology, but it says that dancing and fighting is actually the same thing in a different coin.
Yeah.
So you flip the coin, the movement of the fighting becomes a dance. But when you flip the coin in the other way, the dance becomes a martial arts.
Yeah. There's a very interesting intersection between dance and martial arts. Many dance forms are based on martial movements, like a chasse in ballet comes from movements that are used in kite formations.
Really?
That's my understanding. Yeah, because you had to be able to push forward and a specific coordination. You have like Highland dance that's done over swords. Your classic dancing, you can see these things. There's various friends who have dug deep into this, and like if you look at the traditional Chinese martial arts, theater, dance, and martial arts are very, very deep intertwined. It's all stuff. And then from within our theory, right? Which well, actually, we got this term from Fighting Monkey, but it helped me conceptualize other things. Body to body practices,
right?
Which is all the things where you're interacting with another body. So obviously, dance can be
a body to body,
everything, right? You can be dancing to
find out kind of what's happening with your joints. You can
Right.
you can dance with a tree doing parkour, dance with juggling,
Mm-hmm.
or you can dance with another person. But something
Mm-hmm.
another person can be totally expressive and cooperative, or it can be totally competitive and non-expressive.
Mm-hmm.
Whole spectrum that exists in between.
And the exploring that spectrum, I think, makes our practice beautiful
Yeah.
because you can develop so much in so many different layers.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I really like capoeira. Like as a self-defense MMA martial artist, like people are like, it's not a great martial art. As far as being the best at making the other guy fall down or choke them out, it's not. But as a tool to build overall movement competency, that's extraordinary.
Extraordinary for sure.
Okay,
Wow.
I'm sleepy, so I got
No worries, no worries. And
Sure.
thank you so much for taking your time and talking to me. This has been a great experience, and I would love to meet you someday, man. Like if you ever visit Japan, hit me up. Mikasa Sukasa.
Sounds good, man. We'll see. But
Yeah, man.
come on over here as well, and
Thank you.
we'll have to get a chance to train together. So
That'd be awesome.
bye for today.
Bye for today. Thank you so much. Peace.